The bridge didn't just crack that morning, it screamed. And when 40 tons of cement started crawling across wood rated for 5, I realized I wasn't watching construction progress. I was watching a disaster countdown in real time. The first sound was a deep groan, like something ancient being forced to carry weight it was never meant to hold. I froze at the edge of my property as the cement truck rolled forward, slow and confident, its rotating drum humming like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. That bridge was mine, a narrow wooden span crossing a shallow creek, built decades ago for light vehicles and rural access. I had maintained it myself, reinforced planks, replaced bolts, inspected supports every year. I knew every inch of it, and I knew its limit. 5 tons. The truck crossing it weighed 8 times that. I waved both arms, shouting for the driver to stop. He slowed, looked uncertain, then pointed vaguely ahead as if to say, "I've been cleared." Cleared by who? Not by physics. The tires rolled onto the center span. The wood dipped lower than I had ever seen. Bolts strained. One support beam shifted with a sharp pop that echoed under the structure. For a second, I truly believed it would collapse right there. But it didn't. It survived. Barely. When the truck reached the other side, the bridge didn't return to its original level. It sagged. Just slightly, but noticeably. Enough that I could see the alignment was off. That wasn't wear and tear. That was structural compromise. I immediately walked the length of the bridge, inspecting every joint. A hairline fracture had formed along one of the primary beams near the midpoint. Fresh wood fibers exposed. A warning sign if I had ever seen one. And this wasn't random traffic. This was WA-approved construction routing for a new development behind my land. Instead of using the main access road, they had decided my private bridge was the convenient shortcut. No consultation, no reinforcement, no permission. I had already sent emails about load limits. I had posted visible signage. I had warned them that heavy commercial vehicles would damage the structure. Their responses had been polite but dismissive. Temporary use, minimal impact, within acceptable tolerance. Standing there, staring at that fresh fracture, I understood something clearly. If I didn't stop this, the next crossing wouldn't just damage the bridge. It could destroy it, and maybe take someone down with it. That was the moment this stopped being a minor inconvenience. It became a countdown. Do you want me to continue to Chapter 2? Chapter 2, the second crossing. I thought the warning would be enough. It wasn't. The next morning, just after sunrise, I heard the low rumble again. Diesel engines have a way of announcing themselves long before they appear, and as that vibration rolled through the ground beneath my feet, I knew exactly what was coming. Another cement truck. I stepped outside before it reached the bend in the road. The bridge looked different in the early light. The center sag was subtle, but now that I had seen it, I couldn't unsee it. The hairline fracture along the beam had widened slightly overnight, just enough to catch dust inside the split. The truck rounded the corner. This time, I didn't wave frantically. I stood in the center of the bridge. The driver slowed, clearly confused. I pointed at the bright red sign bolted to the railing, max load 5 tons. He leaned out the window. "WA cleared access," he called down. "That bridge is structurally compromised," I replied. "You cross it again, you risk collapse." He looked unsure. But behind him, a second construction vehicle had already appeared, blocking any easy retreat. The pressure was subtle but real. Schedules, deadlines, authority from someone higher up. He checked his phone, probably a message from a supervisor. Then he gestured forward, and drove. The first tire hit the wooden planks with a heavy thud. The bridge responded instantly, a deep creak followed by a sharp cracking snap from beneath the center span. The sag dipped lower than yesterday. Not dramatically, but enough that my stomach tightened. I stepped off the bridge, watching every inch of it flex under the truck's weight. Halfway across, one of the side rails splintered outward. A bolt popped loose and clattered into the creek below. The driver accelerated slightly, instinct, maybe fear, and the truck finally cleared the far side. When the weight lifted, the bridge did not recover. The dip remained, worse than before. I walked to the midpoint and pressed my hand against the fractured beam. The crack had extended several inches along the grain. This wasn't cosmetic damage anymore. This was progressive failure. I pulled out my phone and documented everything. Close-ups, Wide shots, a slow pan underneath the span showing the leaning support post that hadn't been leaning yesterday. Then I did something different. Instead of another polite email, I sent a formal notice of liability. If they continued to use my bridge, they would be responsible for structural collapse and any injuries that followed. I thought that would stop them. But that afternoon, I received a short reply. Construction access will proceed as scheduled. And just like that, the countdown moved forward again. Do you want me to continue to Chapter 3? 3. Chapter 3 When warnings turn into defiance. By the third day, this wasn't about misunderstanding anymore. It was defiance. I was already outside when I saw the SUV pull up ahead of the trucks. Karen stepped out, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, posture perfectly composed, like this was just another routine oversight visit. Behind her, 2 cement trucks idled. 2. I felt the ground hum beneath my boots. She approached calmly. We received your notice, she said, voice steady. However, our engineers determined temporary construction traffic is acceptable. Which engineers? I asked. She didn't answer directly. You're obstructing authorized access. Authorized. That word carried more weight in her tone than the trucks did on my bridge. I walked her to the center span. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply pointed down. The sag was obvious now. Nearly 3 inches lower than the original alignment. The fracture in the main beam had widened enough to slide a coin into. She glanced at it, then looked away quickly. It's superficial, she said. That's when the first truck began moving forward. I stepped in front of it again. You cross now, I said clearly, and you're doing it with documented structural damage and written liability notice. The driver hesitated. His engine idled louder, almost impatient. Karen crossed her arms. We're on a timeline. Move. The pressure was thick in the air. Workers were watching. Neighbors had started to gather. No one wanted to be the one who backed down. I stepped aside slowly, but I held up my phone, recording. State your name and confirm you're instructing this driver to proceed despite visible structural damage, I said calmly. For a split second, her composure cracked. Then she said it. You may proceed. The truck rolled forward. The moment the front axle reached the midpoint, the bridge reacted violently. A loud crack echoed beneath us, not a creak this time. A break. The entire span dropped suddenly by another inch. Gasps erupted around us. One of the vertical support posts beneath the bridge tilted sharply. Downstream. The wood fibers around the cracked beam split further, the fracture racing along the grain like lightning. The driver froze halfway across. Even Karen looked shaken now. But instead of ordering him back, she waved forward again. Keep going, she shouted. And that was the moment something shifted inside me. They weren't misinformed. They weren't unaware. They were gambling. With wood. With gravity. With someone's life. As the truck finally cleared the far side, the bridge sagged lower than it ever had before. It didn't collapse, but it was close. Close enough that I knew the next move couldn't just be another warning. It had to change the outcome entirely. Do you want me to continue to Chapter 4? 4. Chapter 4 The line I drew. That night, I stopped thinking about persuasion. I started thinking about proof. If Karen wanted authority, I would give her something stronger than opinion. I would give her evidence no one could ignore. Before sunrise, I walked the entire length of the bridge with measuring tools. I documented the sag precisely, 4¼ inches below original level. I photographed the split beam with a ruler pressed against the fracture to show its expansion. I crawled underneath and filmed the leaning support post, now visibly displaced in the soil. Then I made 3 calls. First, the county building inspector. Second, the non-emergency police line. Third, my insurance provider. I explained the situation calmly and factually. Repeated overweight crossings, visible structural compromise, written liability notice ignored. No drama, just risk. By 8 a.m., I had placed bright orange barricades at both ends of the bridge. Not blocking it illegally, simply marking it as unsafe. I mounted 2 visible cameras facing the entrance and the damaged beam. And I added 1 more sign beneath the weight limit. Structure under official review. At 8:17 a.m., the convoy returned. Karen's SUV stopped short when she saw the barricades. She stepped out slowly this time, scanning the cameras, the signage, the documentation laid out on a folding table near the entrance. "What is this?" she asked sharply. "Documentation," I replied. The cement trucks idled behind her. "You can't shut down access," she said. "I didn't," I answered. "The structure did." Right then, one of the officers I had spoken to the night before pulled up behind the convoy. Not lights flashing, not dramatic, just present. Another vehicle followed, the building inspector. Karen's posture shifted almost instantly. The inspector walked to the center of the bridge, looked at the sag, then crouched to examine the fractured beam. He didn't need long. "This is active structural failure," he said clearly. "No heavy vehicle traffic until reinforced." One of the officers approached Karen. "Were you previously notified about load limits?" She nodded slightly. "And about damage after prior crossings?" Another pause. "Yes." Behind us, the lead truck driver stepped out of his cab, looking visibly uncomfortable now. The officer looked back at the bridge, then at Karen. "If that collapses under a vehicle, someone gets seriously hurt," he said. Silence settled over the road. For the first time since this began, the momentum wasn't hers. It wasn't mine either. It belonged to the facts. And facts don't bend under pressure. But consequences were only beginning to take shape. Do you want me to continue to Chapter 5? 5. Chapter 5. When authority meets evidence. Once officials were on scene, the tone changed completely. What had started as a standoff between neighbors and construction crews now looked like a formal safety inquiry. The officer walked the span carefully, testing the planks with measured steps. The building inspector knelt near the fractured beam, pressing a small metal gauge into the split to assess its depth. "It's progressed," he muttered. "This didn't happen overnight." Karen stood a few feet away, arms folded again, but this time it wasn't confidence. It was containment. The lead officer turned toward her. "You were notified in writing about weight restrictions." "Yes," she answered, controlled but tight. "And you authorized continued crossings." She hesitated just long enough to matter. "The development has a schedule," she said. The officer didn't react to the excuse. Instead, he looked at the truck drivers. "Were you informed of the 5-ton load limit?" One of them nodded slowly. "We saw the sign. And the visible damage." Another pause. "Yes." The inspector stood and addressed everyone. "This structure is compromised. Continued heavy crossings could cause sudden collapse. If a vehicle had been centered when that lower support shifted, we'd be having a different conversation." That sentence landed heavily. Different conversation. The officer pulled out a notepad. Statements were taken. Times were recorded. My documentation was reviewed. Emails, certified notices, video clips showing Karen instructing the driver to proceed despite visible damage. The cameras I had installed that morning had captured everything clearly. The officer finally looked at Karen again. "Ma'am, knowingly directing overweight vehicles across a posted restricted structure after written liability notice may constitute reckless endangerment." The word hung in the air. Reckless endangerment. She tried to argue procedure, permits, development approvals. But none of that overrode posted load limits or visible structural failure. The lead driver was also addressed directly. "You have discretion to refuse unsafe operation," the officer told him firmly. "Weight restriction signage is enforceable." The trucks were ordered to turn around and leave the area immediately. Construction access through my bridge was suspended pending structural reinforcement and official re-evaluation. No handcuffs clicked. No dramatic arrest unfolded on the roadside. But citations were issued, formal violation notices were written, and a safety investigation was officially opened. As the convoy slowly backed away, the bridge remained standing, sagging, fractured, but intact. The real collapse hadn't been wood or bolts. It had been assumption. Assumption that deadlines outranked safety. Assumption that pressure would silence warnings. Standing there watching the trucks disappear down the road, I realized something important. This wasn't the end. This was accountability beginning. Do you want me to continue to Chapter 6? 6. Chapter 6. Accountability. 2 weeks later, the bridge was still closed. Temporary steel supports had been installed beneath the center span under county supervision, stabilizing the structure enough to prevent further sagging. But the damage was undeniable. Engineering reports confirmed what I had warned from the beginning. Repeated overweight crossings had accelerated structural fatigue and caused measurable load-bearing compromise. The investigation moved quickly once documentation was reviewed. My emails. The certified liability notice. Video evidence of the visible fracture. Recorded instruction to proceed despite clear warnings. Official inspection results confirming failure risk. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. And procedure is powerful when the facts are clean. The WA board was formally notified of safety violations and failure to adhere to posted load restrictions. Fines were issued for unauthorized commercial use of a private restricted structure. The construction company received penalties for operating overweight vehicles across a marked load-limited bridge after visible warning. Karen was cited for reckless disregard of documented structural risk in her role overseeing site access coordination. It wasn't a cinematic courtroom showdown. It was administrative accountability, hearings, reports, official findings. But consequences carry weight even when they arrive quietly. The final determination was clear. The bridge should never have been used for commercial cement transport without structural reinforcement and certified re-rating. Written warnings were ignored. Risk was knowingly accepted. Liability fell primarily on the HOA's site oversight decision-making, specifically the authorization to continue crossings after structural compromise was documented. Repairs were ordered, not cosmetic repairs. Full structural reinforcement. The HOA was required to fund beam replacement, support realignment, and load recertification before any future access discussions could occur. A formal agreement was drafted restricting commercial vehicle access permanently unless engineering upgrades were approved in advance. The bridge that once sagged under pressure was rebuilt stronger than before. But something else had changed too. The assumption that convenience outweighs caution. The belief that small property owners won't push back. The idea that warnings are just obstacles to push through. Standing on the restored span months later, I ran my hand along the new reinforced beam. Solid, level, secure. It hadn't taken shouting. It hadn't taken revenge. It had taken documentation, patience, and the willingness to let consequences follow actions.
Some bridges break from weight, others break from choice, and this one broke because warnings were repeated and ignored until there was nothing left to save. If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments.